Hi folks, this is Dr. Cywes. I am the Carb Addiction Doc, and as I tape this episode, it's very personal for me because it's about me and it's about my family lineage. And what we're going to talk about today are practical steps to prevent or reduce the risk of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. Folks, I've just come back. I'm South African, and my mother lives in South Africa. She's in her late 80s, and her brain is Swiss cheese. She has progressive Alzheimer's disease. And over the last few years, I've just watched her deteriorate and deteriorate and deteriorate. Her mother died of Alzheimer's disease, of dementia. And I see her going the same way. I see this robust, strong woman who's always been that independent, charismatic, strong human being, supporter of our family, and still is physically strong as an ox. But I see her brain deteriorating. And I see her memory just gone. No capacity for short-term memory. Longer-term memory, yes. She remembers me. But I have to reintroduce her to my son every day. And the question's always the same. Oh, who's that? And you know, folks, when we can't rely on memory, we rely on moments of happiness. And I get her to smile and I get her to laugh but it's so sad. And fortunately, we've been able, though my father has passed, we've been able to keep her in her home, surrounded by all the things that she's familiar with, because familiarity is so important to her. And we've been able to bring caregivers in 24/7 to take care of her. Wonderful, wonderful, empathetic human beings that she calls by the name of friends from years ago. We've got this one wonderful caregiver called Henrietta, but my mom insists on calling her Brenda. It's just... And we know what? It's tragic, it's funny, and it's personal. And it's personal, folks, because now we're going to get into some of the science and then some of the prevention. I'm not going to go deep story into Alzheimer's. I've just done a series of interviews with a brilliant scientist by the name of Stephen Cunane. If you go back a few episodes from here in my channel, you'll see the 3 episodes with Stephen Cunane talking about the science behind Alzheimer's. And I'm going to personalize this and then summarize in 5 or 6 steps what you can do to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's. And if you do all of these things, then if you do get it and it's progressive, you've done everything you can do. It is not up to you. But you can accelerate it, make it worse, make it come on quicker if you don't pay homage to these things. And we're going to explore them. But before I start that, why am I concerned? Folks, as you think about your life, as you think about getting older, I can tell you categorically that the disease I most fear in life, the disease I most fear and I absolutely don't want to get, and I'm highly likely to get because of my family history, is Alzheimer's. Cancer, heart attack, stroke, those are secondary. But Alzheimer's burdens the people around you. Now, I lovingly and willingly take care of my mother, along with a team, along with my wife, along with the team of people we've been able to put around her. Lovingly, willingly do that. But I never, ever, ever want to impose that on my own family. I want to wake up dead one day. Healthy, dead. I don't want my brain to rot away. I don't want to go out that way. And the likelihood is very high that I am going to. Because just one little bit of science, when you look at, and there's so much interconnection here, when you look at who is most likely to get Alzheimer's disease, it is people who genetically have something called the ApoE4 gene. All of us have 2 copies, one from our mom, one from our father. And there's 2 options. You can either have, or 3 options. You can have an ApoE4, you can have an ApoE3, and you can have an ApoE2. What are apolipoproteins. What are they? Well, look at the interconnection here, folks. The apoproteins are the proteins, they're kind of like the zip codes for all fat, for all of the transport molecules for fat in our body. VLDL, chylomicrons, LDL, the one that causes, no, it doesn't cause, the one that is associated with heart attacks and strokes. But the transport of fat, the zip codes of fat around our body, is transported around by the apolipoprotein molecules. And the ApoE proteins are very active in the brain, and they transport fat and cholesterol around the brain. And they are made locally in the brain. They're also made by the liver and by macrophages. So there's a lot of cross-reactivity of the apolipoproteins with lipid transport or fat transport around the body. And that's genetically programmed, so it's there for a positive reason. The oldest one of those is the ApoE4. And the ApoE4 gene that transports cholesterol and fat around the brain, especially into the neurons, it's made in the astrocytes, transported to the neurons, where the fat and the cholesterol is necessary. It has to be transported. The cholesterol is made in the brain in part and has to be transported into those neurons. And the ApoE4 is that little protein that is the zip code to tell the fat where to go. And the ApoE4 protein, for a variety of reasons, is highly associated with the development of Alzheimer's disease over time because of aberrations in lipid transport. So if you have one copy of the ApoE4 gene, you have about a 5 to 10-fold increased risk over a normal person of getting Alzheimer's. If you have two copies, if you have both copies, mom and dad's copies, it's 30 to 40% likelihood, 30 to 40 times greater risk of Alzheimer's when you get older. And I have the ApoE4 gene. I have one allele of it. Got that from my mom. She got it from her mother. No blame. It's just the reality. The ApoE2, which is a newer one in our genetics, is the protective one. My statement to you is do not find out which ApoE gene you have. Live as if you've got the 4, but I would strongly recommend not finding out. And I got my reasons. But if you do it, Ancestor.com, any of the genetic testings, the ones that you send off a little bit of a smear from the inside of your cheek, and you've got to check the box. Do I want to know what my ApoE status is? You got to check that box. They will tell you it costs $100 or $200. You can find out. But I would tell you, live your life as if you're a 4, but don't know. Anyway, you can decide what you want to do there. So, okay, I'm an ApoE4 positive person. What can I do to mitigate that risk? The risk is not absolute. The risk is not absolute. But what can I do? What can I do to reduce that risk of the progression, the onset, the progression, and the severity of that ApoE4 gene? And now I'm going to list and briefly discuss the 5 or 6 things you can do. Well, I'm not intending to do this one, folks, but the first one you can do is die young. Race motorcycles without your helmet. Die young. Go cliff diving without a parachute. Die young. I'm not going to do that. I want to live long and prosper, and I want to die instantly. Don't want to suffer. Don't want to have a brain of Swiss cheese. That's one. The second thing you could have done is selected better parents. Silly. It's not at this stage. Now, here's the reality of science. Down the road, we may become more selective. Think about this, folks. Genetic engineering of children may be possible. We may be able to deselect that ApoE4 gene. Yes, we can do that. Yes, we can do that. We can actually splice out the ApoE gene and insert a 2 or a 3. Think about that in the future. Maybe not, certainly not my generation, but maybe the next 2 generations. Now we've got to look at the legality of that, but the practicality of that is already possible. We can already do that. So gene editing is possible, and maybe we can think about that. Don't want to go down that road. But as a scientist, it is already possible. Spin that around your head first. So selecting better genetics, not for me, I can't change my own genetics, but for grandkids or for children down the road, you got to decide, are you for that or against that? Not going to go there. The next most important thing, folks, and I'd like you to watch the show notes on this because I've got a graphic. A paper that was published in Neurology in 2018. And this is a study, incredibly good study, very powerful. It was a 44-year-long study that looked in part at, it was a group of women, but it applies to men as well, at people who got Alzheimer's and who didn't. And they looked at criteria for that, irrespective of the ApoE status. And this was a group of women, they divided by those who exercised, who were fit in midlife, and those who were not, who did not exercise. And it was just an astounding difference. The group of women that did very little exercise, that were unfit, very high prevalence of Alzheimer's after the age of 75. The group that were fit in middle age did not develop dementia. And in fact, the slide that you'll see in the show notes over here has this statement to it. A high level of fitness in midlife is associated with an almost complete absence of late life dementia. So one of the most important things you can do, no matter how old you are, is work on your physical fitness. Work on physical activity. Bring that in as a brain stimulator. The mechanism is unclear to me at this stage, but the data is absolute and reproducible. And this was a brilliant 44-year study published in the journal Neurology in 2018. And in the show notes below this, I will show the dramatic graph. If you go to my Instagram page right now, you will see that graph. I've already put it up there. So number one, exercise. Male or female, exercise. I don't like the word exercise. Be physically active, get fit. Number two, and this comes specifically from Stephen Cunane's research, but is duplicated multiple times over. One of the few conditionally essential molecules for brain, for neuron repair, for neuron function is a polyunsaturated fatty acid, a 3-omega fatty acid, specifically called DHA. There are a lot of precursors to DHA, and the liver does make that, but it doesn't convert EPA at a fast enough rate into DHA to support the brain. So the consumption of DHA on a daily basis, yes, DHA does get stored in the fat cells, and we'll talk about that at point number 3, but consumption of DHA. Now, how do you get it in? Number one, fish and seafood. Fatty fish and seafood. Fatty fish and seafood. Whether it's salmon, whether it's wild-caught or farm-raised fish, there's a slight difference, but not a massive difference. But eating fish, eating shellfish, eating seafood, your shrimp, your mussels, your oysters. Seafood, diet rich in seafood is concentrated in DHA, and you can get a huge volume of DHA in a small amount of fish, and that should be part of your diet once, twice, 3 times a day. And in fact, I've raised my conscious awareness of including seafood, not just eating a fish for my meal, but perhaps having some sardines, having some oysters along with my steak. DHA supplementation. But on top of that, Stephen Cunane's research recommends around, if you have a strong history of dementia, around 3 grams, 3,000 milligrams, 3,000 grams of DHA. Now, I personally take between 500 and 1,000, but I eat a lot of fish. And I've calculated that my fish brings me enough milligrams. But 3 grams, 3,000 milligrams is the ideal to reverse cognitive impairment. So DHA in fish, number 2 recommendation to reduce your risk of Alzheimer's. The third one is this. The human brain requires a high level of ketone bodies continuously going, of ketones continuously going into those neurons as a substrate, not just for energy, not just for the mitochondria, but also to build healthy fat to repair brain cells with. So being in ketosis, being in fat-adapted ketosis, being insulin sensitive, is a crucial part to reducing your risk of dementia, reducing your risk of Alzheimer's. And in particular, if you are a high insulin producer, if you are someone with hyperinsulinemia, whether you're a type 2 diabetic or just insulin resistant, that group of people, it's been proven, have early cognitive impairment. In fact, a very powerful study that just blew my mind is that when you look at hyperinsulinemic people, and this again was done in women, and one of the other effects of hyperinsulinemia is polycystic ovarian syndrome. So if you study a group of women with polycystic ovarian syndrome and you ask them to do certain mental questionnaires that can calculate their level of cognitive impairment, if you measure mild cognitive impairment with polycystic ovarian syndrome as a testament to to hyperinsulinemia and insulin resistance, that cognitive impairment can be reversed with DHA and a ketogenic diet. Now, here's what's interesting. In this study that I'm quoting, the average age of those women, well, guess what it is? Guess what it is? What do you think? Average age of women, high insulin producers, hyperinsulinemic, insulin resistant, PCOS, cognitive impairment. How old do you think they were? Folks, they were 23. 23 years old. Already demonstrable, measurable cognitive impairment because of their hyperinsulinemia. And if you correct that insulin resistance by not eating carbohydrates, by eating a ketogenic diet high in fat, a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, you can reverse that, it's been proven, and you reduce that risk of the onset of cognitive impairment and dementia. And particularly hyperinsulinemic people, that is important. So the third step is ketosis. Being ketogenic, being fat adapted, reduces your risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. So therefore, this is what we call type 3 diabetes or type 3 insulin resistance. That's why dementia and Alzheimer's is so tightly linked to the consumption of carbohydrates. Number four, and again, this is research that's been done and proven. The consumption of up to 30 grams, a tablespoon in the morning and a tablespoon in the evening, 2 tablespoons of either MCT oil or coconut oil. MCT oil has medium chain triglycerides, MCT, or coconut oil reduces the risk of that cognitive impairment. The initiation of that cognitive impairment can actually reverse that. So taking a tablespoon of MCT oil or coconut oil twice a day, you can have it in your coffee, you can have it over your food, but getting that in every day is the fourth way to treat and reduce your risk of dementia and Alzheimer's. The fifth one, and again, this is based on a very powerful study. Do not take a statin. No statins. Because statins reduce the LDL that delivers the DHA and the other fats to your brain. No statin. And I'm basing that statement on a study, a friend of mine, David Diamond, colleague, alluded me to the study, where in a group of men in their 70s who had cognitive impairment who were on a statin. So you got a group of men all on a statin, all with cognitive impairment, various forms of early dementia. They stopped the statin. And a statistically significant, a very large proportion of the men, their cognitive impairment reversed. That was the only intervention, stopping the statin. And they stopped that, I believe, for 8 or 12 weeks. They demonstrated a reversal of cognitive impairment. Now, how do we know that was the statin? Well, they then put them back on the statin. And within 12 weeks, their cognitive impairment was back. Categorical proof that the statin induced cognitive impairment in this group of men. So no statin. No statin. Now, I'm going to add one further thing that is very controversial. But if you have a high risk of dementia and you lean more to the diabetic side, to the hyperglycemic side, rather than to the hyperinsulinemic side. And that can be measured. We measure that blood work all the time in my office so we can decide whether you are trending more toward diabetes or trending more toward obesity and hyperinsulinemia or hyperglycemia. And I don't want to go into the science of that right now. But if you have a higher risk for diabetes, or if you have type 2 diabetes and you're in the process of reversing with a ketogenic diet, the other medication I can tell you, which is for the vascular reasons, not just for the brain reasons, is a baby aspirin once a day, or maybe Monday, Wednesday, Friday. A baby aspirin. That's controversial, but I certainly recommend that if you are diabetogenic. So to recap, you may or may not want to know what your ApoE4 status is, but quite frankly, it doesn't matter. But if you are a 4, or if you don't know if you're a 4, the best way to reduce your risk of dementia, and it's not an absolute, because you could still get dementia, but then at least you can say, I did everything in my power not to have it. The 5 things you can do, plus the bonus. Number 1, be physically fit. As fit as you can be. Number 2, DHA and fish. 3,000 milligrams a day. In a combination of fish plus your DHA capsule. Number 3, be in ketosis. Be on a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, treat your insulin resistance, become insulin sensitive, become fat adapted. Get ketones to your brain as a substrate, not just sugar. Number 4, add 30 grams, 215 milligrams, 2 tablespoons a day of coconut oil or medium chain triglyceride oil, MCT oil. Number 5, do not take a statin. And number 6, consider taking a baby aspirin if you are at cardiovascular risk, if you have diabetes. And if you do those things, in my opinion, that is the single best strategy you can do to delay, reverse, or prevent Alzheimer's. When I'm 80 years old and I'm still doing these podcasts, you know it worked. My podcast suddenly stopped. Or if I was going blah, 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 so I start repeating, well, I'm already repeating myself. Folks, I don't know if it's going to work. I don't. But it's my best shot. I am the Carb Addiction Doc. If you want to know your blood work, if you want to know what your status is, please hit us up. Set up a consult, text or call or WhatsApp 561-517-0642. Folks, I apologize. We're super busy in my office. So there may be a delay to getting to see me. But you can certainly set up a visit earlier with SHERYL. She can get some of these things done as well as a step toward getting in to see me. I'm one person. I work my ass off, but I'm one person. So I apologize for the delays. Be patient. There are other people like me out there as well. But if you want to see me, that's the best way in. Please leave comments, leave suggestions in the comments below. I am the Carb Addiction Doc. Thank you.